Being broken is a strange, almost surreal state. It's not always a single catastrophic moment. Sometimes it's a slow unraveling, like a sweater that's been snagged so many times you don't notice until suddenly it's full of holes. You walk around carrying the pieces of yourself, wondering if they will ever fit together again, if you can even remember what the hole looked like, or if the pattern was ever yours to begin with. And yet, there is something strangely human about the way fragments can lie scattered, waiting quietly for attention, for care, for the improbable act of rebuilding. The funny thing is how life continues around you while you feel shattered. People carry on with their routines, oblivious to the internal debris you navigate. You might watch someone sip coffee, laugh at a joke, or fold laundry, and it hits like a cosmic joke. Everyone else seems fully assembled, while you are walking through a house of mirrors where every reflection is missing pieces. And yet this very absurdity, the world spinning on while you feel fragmented, is often where the first sparks of rebuilding emerge. It is the place where awareness begins to whisper, you can begin again slowly, awkwardly, beautifully. Rebuilding yourself after being broken is not about pretending the cracks aren't there. It is not about gluing pieces together as if nothing happened. It's about learning to hold the fractures with tenderness, curiosity, and sometimes a gentle smirk at how inventive life can be when it dismantles you. Each broken piece carries a story, a lesson, an imprint of survival. They are not signs of failure. They are evidence that you endured when the world, or someone, or even yourself, tried to undo you. The process begins with small acts of presence. Sitting with yourself without immediately fixing or judging. Breathing when the chest feels tight, even if it shakes. Allowing a moment of silence where there was once panic. These seemingly minor choices are the foundational bricks of rebuilding. They are not dramatic, but they are essential. They accumulate quietly, invisibly, until you notice that some of the internal scaffolding has been restored. And the mind will be clever, of course. It will remind you of everything you lost, everything you did wrong, every time you believed you could have done better. It will rehearse old failures with cinematic flair, like it's auditioning for an Oscar in self-recrimination. And you, slowly, begin to notice that you do not need to watch every performance. You can look away, take a breath, or even chuckle softly at the elaborate plot lines your mind has constructed. The ability to notice without surrendering is one of the first acts of true rebuilding. Healing and rebuilding are inseparable. You do not rebuild by ignoring pain. You rebuild by acknowledging it, sitting with it, and finding ways to live alongside it without letting it dictate your every action. Sometimes the pain feels almost absurdly disproportionate, like carrying a piano up a flight of stairs just because you once stubbed your toe on a single key. And yet, each step of noticing, each soft acknowledgement, each small act of care is like setting down the piano, one key at a time, until the weight is manageable and you can breathe again. Another sign that rebuilding has begun is the way you respond to mistakes and setbacks. Once, a misstep might have felt like confirmation that the entire project of your life was ruined. Now you might pause, breathe, maybe even smirk at the ridiculousness of overdramatizing a minor setback, and continue forward. This doesn't erase the feeling, but it shifts your relationship to it. You learn that brokenness is not terminal. It is a state from which growth is possible, and resilience can emerge, often in surprising and playful ways. Rebuilding also shows up in the body. The tight shoulders loosen slightly, the stomach relaxes, the jaw unclenches. You notice that breathing is not a struggle but a choice, subtle and profound. The body, which carries the evidence of being broken, begins to reclaim space and freedom, and with it, the mind notices the possibility of reconstructing its own internal narrative. And slowly, you may notice curiosity re-emerging. Not the heavy, interrogative kind, but the gentle, exploratory kind. What feels good right now? What can I do to feel a little more steady? What is one small action that reminds me I exist, even if the world has shifted under my feet? Curiosity is a subtle, profound tool in rebuilding because it opens doors that fear had slammed shut. It allows small experiments in presence, pleasure, and agency, which gradually expand into larger, more stable patterns. Humor, absurdity, and perspective are indispensable companions. You might notice, with a soft shake of the head, how elaborate your own mind can be when rehearsing disasters, or how strangely inventive fear and self-doubt are when left unchecked. Recognizing this absurdity, allowing yourself a laugh, or even just a smirk, is not avoidance, it is presence. It is a subtle reclaiming of agency, a gentle rebellion against the internal narratives that try to convince you you are irreparable. The rebuilding process is also about choosing small, tangible actions. Eating a nourishing meal, going for a walk, reaching out to someone for connection, letting a soft laugh escape. These actions, small as they may seem, accumulate into a new internal structure, a scaffold on which the old fragments can rest more comfortably. They are acts of self-trust, subtle but profound, signaling that even after being broken, you can make choices that honor life, presence, and your own resilience. Stay here for a moment. Notice how the chest rises without tension, even slightly. Notice the shoulders relaxing fractionally. Notice the way your mind begins to hesitate before rehearsing disaster, as if testing whether you will follow it blindly this time. Even these subtle shifts are markers of progress. They are proof that rebuilding is possible, not in a single moment of dramatic repair, but in the cumulative, almost imperceptible acts of noticing, choosing, and allowing. The mind will still attempt clever narratives. You are broken beyond repair. Nothing you do matters. And yet, the brilliance of rebuilding is that you do not need to argue with every claim. You can let it speak, observe it, and continue your acts of care. Each gentle act of presence, each small pause, each soft acknowledgement is proof that the mind does not get the final word. You begin to reclaim narrative authority, brick by brick, breath by breath, smile by smile. And slowly, the first hints of wholeness emerge. The internal fractures don't disappear, but you learn to hold them differently. They are part of your story, not the entirety of it. You notice small moments where joy is accessible without guilt, curiosity is allowed without fear, laughter escapes without self-criticism. These subtle indicators are profound. They are evidence that rebuilding is not only possible, it is already underway. Even the ordinary moments begin to feel different. The cup of coffee that once felt like a small indulgence now feels like a deliberate act of care. A walk around the block becomes a tiny ceremony of presence. A soft conversation with a friend is a scaffold for trust and connection. These acts, small and consistent, accumulate, building the architecture of a self that is learning to exist fully again, tenderly, and without unnecessary judgment. Healing, presence, and humor weave together in this stage. You notice the absurdity of the past, the clever exaggerations of fear, the persistent insistence of self-criticism, and allow yourself to smile at it. Not as a dismissal, not as denial, but as recognition that even in brokenness, resilience and creativity persist. This recognition is a critical marker. The self you are rebuilding is not fragile. It is cunning, human, and capable of learning to stand again. Stay a little longer. Let the body settle into its reclaimed space. Let the mind notice the subtle shifts. Let the heart recognize the faint but undeniable sense that rebuilding is not a futile effort, but a practice that grows stronger with each act of presence. Each pause, each breath, each small laugh or acknowledgement is a brick in the foundation of a self capable of living fully, tenderly, and even playfully in the world again. Rebuilding yourself after being broken isn't a sprint. It's a slow, deliberate choreography with your own presence. It starts with noticing small, almost imperceptible shifts in how you inhabit your own life. Perhaps you realize that you no longer flinch at minor setbacks, that a mistake doesn't collapse your entire internal world, or that a critical thought no longer has the authority to command your day. These moments are like discovering that the foundation beneath you, though cracked, is still solid enough to begin constructing again. It is astonishing how easily the mind can exaggerate setbacks, almost theatrically, as if auditioning for a tragedy award. A single misstep can feel like a verdict on your character, an epic failure in a story you didn't want to star in. But you begin to notice the absurdity in these mental productions. You watch them unfold with a soft smirk, like observing a cat perform tricks it doesn't understand while pretending to be menacing. That smirk, tiny as it is, becomes a sign of regained perspective, a signal that rebuilding is underway. Healing in this stage begins to weave through your daily actions. The coffee you drink, the meal you eat, the walk you take, these become deliberate acts of presence, small ways of reclaiming agency over your life. They are not dramatic gestures, but they accumulate. They form scaffolding on which the self can be reconstructed. Each act, tiny and mundane, signals to the mind, the body, and the heart that life is not solely about surviving breakdown. It is about quietly reclaiming the right to exist fully, tenderly, and playfully again. And yet, rebuilding is never linear. Some days, the weight of old fractures presses down, reminding you that being broken leaves traces. Perhaps a familiar anxiety rises, perhaps old shame whispers, perhaps the body carries tension from years of survival. And yet, the subtle difference now is that you can observe these pressures without surrendering to them. You pause, breathe, maybe even notice the absurdity of how dramatic it feels for a minor trigger to feel like a tsunami, and allow the tension to settle without judgment. The ability to inhabit your own experience with this subtle awareness is the foundation for reconstruction. Another sign of rebuilding is the way your body participates in your recovery. The tightness in your shoulders, the tension in your chest, the shallow rhythm of your breath, they begin to ease, almost imperceptibly as you practice presence. A small stretch, a slow exhale, a deliberate movement across the room becomes an act of reclamation. The body remembers how to inhabit space without bracing against pain or internalized judgment. The mind notices this physical freedom and begins to trust the process of rebuilding. Curiosity starts to emerge as a guiding principle. Not the interrogative kind that critiques every action, but the exploratory kind that asks, what feels steady right now? What small step could I take to feel present in my body? Where is tenderness possible? These questions, subtle as they are, invite experimentation, and experimentation is the foundation of reconstruction. You learn to test your boundaries, to explore capacities, and to notice resilience that has been quietly present all along. Small, repeated acts of care are the building blocks of rebuilding. Preparing a meal, taking a walk, calling a friend, laughing at the absurdity of your own internal dramatics. These are the bricks of a life that has been fractured but is learning to stand again. Each choice reinforces agency, presence, and a sense of self that no longer depends on perfection. These are tiny victories, almost invisible, but cumulatively profound. The process also teaches you to observe your own thoughts with a subtle amusement. That internal critic, which once dominated the room with relentless authority, now has to compete with your awareness. You notice when it overreacts, when it invents catastrophic scenarios, when it rehearses past mistakes like a Shakespearean actor obsessed with drama. You might smile internally, a soft acknowledgement that the mind is clever, inventive, persistent, and not in charge anymore. That recognition itself is a form of liberation. Rebuilding is not just about surviving, it is about learning to inhabit life fully again. And life, when you are rebuilding, often presents little absurdities, unexpected twists, and subtle reminders of human resilience. Perhaps a bird lands on your windowsill just when your thoughts are racing, or a song appears at the perfect moment, or a stranger smiles at you on the street. These tiny interventions, often overlooked, are subtle proof that the world continues to exist alongside brokenness, and that moments of presence, connection, and tenderness are possible even in the aftermath of fracture. One of the most profound markers of rebuilding is the emergence of self-compassion. You begin to treat yourself with the tenderness you once reserved for others. You pause before judgment, acknowledge effort instead of only evaluating outcomes, and allow space for growth instead of perfection. You recognize that mistakes are inevitable, and that gentleness is not a luxury. It is the scaffolding that allows broken pieces to align again. Humor continues to thread through the process. The small smirks at your own dramatic internal scripts, the recognition of how absurdly inventive fear can be, the awareness of exaggerations that once dominated your attention, All of this acts as subtle glue for your reconstruction. The ability to notice the ridiculousness without judgment or avoidance signals that presence is expanding, that resilience is not only internal but flexible, capable of bending without breaking further. Stay here for a moment. Notice the body, the breath, the way small movements no longer feel weighted by fear or regret. Notice the mind, which now allows a pause before rehearsing disaster. Notice the small internal victories, a breath unaccompanied by panic, a step forward without self-criticism, a soft acknowledgement of survival. These are the markers of a self that is learning to stand again, not perfectly, not fully, but firmly enough to continue. As rebuilding progresses, you begin to notice patterns in how your internal world interacts with the external. You may respond to challenges with more patience, approach relationships with softer boundaries, or allow yourself small joys without guilt. Each subtle change signals that the fractures are no longer dictating the narrative. They are integrated into a story that includes resilience, agency, and presence. And gradually, a profound realization emerges. Brokenness does not define you. The cracks, the fractures, the moments of collapse, they are not your entirety. They are chapters, not conclusions. And in learning to inhabit them, to move through them, to observe them with curiosity and even amusement, you discover that rebuilding is not an act of repair alone. It is an act of creation. You are assembling a self that is wiser, more flexible, and more capable of inhabiting life fully than you were before. Stay a little longer. Let yourself feel the subtle reclamation of energy. Let your chest rise, your shoulders loosen, your breath deepen. Let the recognition of resilience settle, like sunlight filling a room that has been dark for too long. Let the gentle, persistent acts of rebuilding accumulate into a sense of presence, agency, and subtle joy. Every soft smile, every pause before criticism, every small act of care is a declaration. You are learning to stand again, brick by brick, moment by moment, with tenderness, presence, and occasional levity. Eventually, you notice that the broken pieces are no longer scattered. They are rearranging themselves subtly, as if the body, the mind, and the heart have quietly agreed on a new blueprint. It's not perfect, not seamless, not flawless, but it is yours, and that is the astonishing part. You can almost laugh at how clever life is, leaving you in fragments only to allow the fragments to teach you how to be whole in a way you couldn't have imagined before. There is a soft amusement in recognizing the absurdity, the way the mind exaggerates catastrophe, the way you once treated every stumble like an eternal verdict. Now you watch it, breathe through it, and continue. Rebuilding is a process of reclaiming your own narrative. The self that once felt fragile now begins to speak in subtle but unmistakable ways. You notice thoughts of care instead of criticism, moments of curiosity instead of judgment, small gestures of tenderness toward your own body and mind. Perhaps a smile slips onto your face at the memory of a minor failure that once felt like a full stop. You acknowledge it, allow it, even savor the ridiculous ingenuity of your mind's drama. And in that acknowledgement, a new pattern begins to take hold. You are learning to inhabit your life fully, tenderly, and with subtle humor. The body participates in this reclamation. Shoulders drop, tension softens, breath deepens, and the chest rises in a way that no longer feels like a battle. You may notice the subtle joy of movement, a walk without dread, a stretch without urgency, a simple act of care for yourself without overthinking. These are not minor miracles. They are the foundations of a life rebuilt, of a self learning to inhabit presence without fear. Each small shift signals that the pieces, though once broken, are becoming part of a structure that can support you again. And the mind, ever theatrical, will still try to stage its dramas. You aren't ready. You'll never be whole. You failed. But you notice it now. You observe the exaggerated script, perhaps with a smirk or a soft shake of your head. You recognize the absurdity, the creativity, and you refuse to surrender to it. That refusal is a profound act of reclamation. It is proof that you are no longer defined by past fractures, by the collapse, by the internalized chaos. You are learning to direct your own story. Healing and rebuilding are inseparable. You do not rebuild by pretending the cracks never existed. You rebuild by holding them gently, by noticing how far you've come, by integrating what was broken into a self that is resilient, flexible, and alive. Each scar, each memory of pain, each reminder of what felt impossible becomes part of the architecture of a self capable of standing again. You may marvel at the irony. The very fractures that once defined you are now part of your foundation. Curiosity continues to guide you. You explore presence, connection, and even joy in small doses, testing your capacity for tenderness and agency. The act of experimenting with your own resilience, stepping outside of habitual patterns, noticing reactions without being consumed by them, is central to the process. Each experiment, each small act of courage, quietly reinforces that you are capable of inhabiting life fully again. Humor threads through this journey with quiet insistence. The absurdity of the mind's exaggerations, the dramatic replay of minor failures, the tendency to catastrophize. Observing these things with a soft, bemused smile is not avoidance. It is a subtle tool for rebuilding. Laughter, even in small amounts, loosens tension, shifts perspective, and reminds you that life, fractured as it may be, is still capable of delight and surprise. Small, repeated actions continue to build the internal scaffolding of a new self. You eat meals with presence, take walks with attention, connect with friends without self-criticism, allow moments of pleasure without guilt. Each act is both ordinary and miraculous. It is the material from which resilience is forged, a testament to the fact that brokenness does not preclude wholeness. You may even notice, with astonishment, that the accumulation of these small actions feels like a soft, steady wave lifting you from the wreckage towards something luminous and sustaining. And then comes the remarkable realization: you are no longer afraid of being broken. You are learning to inhabit the fractured parts, to hold them with tenderness, to see them as evidence of survival and strength rather than shame or failure. The cracks no longer terrify, they illuminate. They show you where you have endured, where you have persisted, and where you have begun to reclaim the right to exist fully, tenderly, and even playfully. Stay here. Breathe. Let the chest rise, the shoulders relax, the body feel weightless in small increments. Notice the mind observing itself, the laughter at its own theatrics, the curiosity that now threads through your choices. Feel the relief, subtle but undeniable, of being present without constant judgment, of choosing tenderness over criticism, of practicing care in a world that once made you doubt your capacity for wholeness. These are the hallmarks of a rebuilt self, and slowly the poetic truth emerges. Rebuilding does not erase brokenness. It does not require perfection. It does not demand that life unfold without difficulty. Rebuilding is the gentle, persistent practice of noticing what is, honoring what has been, and creating a self capable of moving forward. The cracks are visible, but they no longer define you. They are part of the architecture of resilience, evidence of endurance, and markers of profound human creativity. Stay a little longer. Let yourself feel the cumulative effect of every soft breath, every smile, every subtle act of self-care, every tiny laugh at your own dramatic mind. Let the weight of being broken lift fractionally, replaced by a sense of spaciousness, agency, and subtle joy. Let the small, repeated acts of rebuilding accumulate into a sense of wholeness that is not perfect, not flashy, but deeply human and profoundly satisfying. And finally, as life continues in its messy, unpredictable, absurd, beautiful way, let a subtle understanding settle in. You are not your fractures, and you are not limited by the collapse that once defined you. You are present, tender, resilient, and capable of standing again. The cracks, the fractures, the echoes of brokenness, they are not enemies. They are guides, markers, and teachers. You can inhabit life fully, with curiosity, with humor, with tenderness, and with the soft, luminous freedom that emerges when you learn to hold yourself together one deliberate, loving act at a time. Stay here. Let the chest rise. Let the shoulders soften. Let the mind rest. Let the heart pulse with the quiet certainty that you are rebuilding, that you are alive, and that life, fractured, imperfect, and radiant, is yours to inhabit fully. Every soft smile, every gentle breath, every tender action is proof. You have been broken, and now you are learning to stand, whole in a way that is uniquely yours.